Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert, or a dinosaur, or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and hear from industry experts. I'm your host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on August 7th, 2023. Kris.
Chris.
And also today we had another Kris. But before then, all this dinosaur talk. Everybody wants to talk with me about dinosaurs. Do you know a show that I used to love when I was a young child?
Oh, what is that?
Land of the Lost. Do you remember Land of the Lost?
Land of the Lost.
Before your time?
No, I watched Land of the Lost.
I'm not talking about the movie that they redid. I'm talking the actual Marshall, Will, and Holly, the season shows back. I think it was in the late 70s. That was one of the things that I actually bought on Apple, by the way, many years ago. Because
Did you really?
Yes, I bought those. I think it was on there. I was looking in what my purchases were, and I saw that.
Oh, wow.
But it was a great show, Land of the Lost. And then next time we can talk about, I used to also like Creature Double Feature and watch Godzilla and some of those other things.
Nice.
We'll get there. With us today, we were able to talk about some dinosaurs, some development, and a number of other topics with none other than Christoph Krieg.
Hello, Kris.
Kris.
Hey, you got two Chris's here, Brad.
I don't know what I'm going to do today. I don't know how to refer to you. And my screen's screwed up too. So now I'm looking at nothing. I'm just going to pretend I'm looking at you both.
To minimize.
Well, I don't know if I minimize or if I move. Look at that. How's that? Is that better? Now I can't see myself.
That's all right.
Better than nothing.
Yes, it is. It is. Kris, how are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Doing very well. Very well, thank you. Been looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too.
For a long time. You were?
Absolutely.
Oh, why are you looking forward to it?
Excuse me?
Why were you looking forward to it?
Because in our pre-conversation, I thought we were pretty much on the same page and found similarities. Is that the right word? I don't know.
Yes.
And I think it could be a very interesting conversation. So
I don't think I know it will be an interesting conversation based on the conversation that we had in the past. But before we get into that conversation, see, my excitement's coming out right now. Can you tell everyone a little bit about you and who you are, where you're from, what you do? And then we'll jump into our dinosaur topic. Dinosaurs are the big thing to these days.
Yeah, sure. My name is Christoph, and I'm the general manager of 365 Business Development. We are a small ISV from Germany, and we're focusing on really small apps with just the target of simplifying the daily business in BC. And I'm in the NAV BC Navision world for around about 18 years now. I started with NAV 3.6, I guess. So we don't have value entries back in the time. I really loved the product just from the very first day, to be honest. And when I learned what's possible with NAV and what you can do with it, I was totally into it. And in 2019, when BC really came up and all these extension model things and extensions V2, I thought this was my moment to get my own company and found my own company and to do some things I saw in pretty much customer projects and pretty much implementations of NAV and the early BC days where I thought, okay, this is something we can do a little better to enrich the product, and that's how I started and where I am today.
No, that's great.
And basically I'm not just a software developer and not just a general manager. this small company, but I'm also some kind of an trainer. Let maybe say trainer, because I always try to influence people on rethinking their habits and their daily business, on shifting from the old C side CHL days to AL, because so much things changed over the last years, and they are about to change. Just mention namespaces for the next version, for example, and in so many projects and so many customer implementations, I see so much old stuff, dinosaur stuff, and I think I can say dinosaur because I'm pretty much also a dinosaur. But yeah, I think this is something which needs to be pushed more and more, and that's why I'm so happy about this conversation here. Yeah.
Well, good. We'll get into it. So you mentioned you work on training. Do you train development or do you train within the application?
Yeah,
so
I train
you focus on training for development.
Yeah.
And do you work with primarily with, I guess you call them students or members of the community that have been using CAL or CAL, or some new members, or both?
Yeah, most time I work with end customers having their own development and development teams, and helps them to switch from the old C-side environment to VS Code. Teach them how they can benefit from what's new, and not just turning the old stuff into a new environment.
So you have an academy class? Is what you offer?
It's more part of our company. We got it's not really that we advertising this stuff, but somehow people one talks to people two, and he said, "Hey, Christoph was at our side, and he taught our development team this, and this is pretty cool. So get into your business." And this is how it works. Basically.
Yeah, word of mouth is sometimes the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, basically we are focusing on being an ISV, creating software, and of course selling the software. But for me, it's also important to see that our customer not just using our software and is pretty happy with our software, but also is happy on implementing his own customizations as well, and doing this the right way. Because what we all have to keep in mind, especially, or not just especially these days, but from the beginning of NAV, it was focusing on it's more 80% solution for your company, I would say. 80% of all the business processes you have in your company are there, and they're pretty solid and pretty straightforward and working. But the gap of 20% you have to buy or make. And in some cases, there are cool solutions like our, of course. But in some other cases, you have to build your own stuff. And then you have to know what you can do using pipelines, using automated testing, using new functionalities like procedure overload, or like whatever, returning complex data types, things which were not possible in Seaside. But you have to know about it,
Yes. So many questions have come to mind listening to what you have to say. And you working with the application for 18 years, you got to see the evolution of development. With BC, they introduced it, and then over the years, it seems to me they've exponentially added functionality to the development environment to make it a little more contemporary. And you also mentioned that as part of this, you're working with end customers to train them on their own development. And you've been working with within the space or within the community for a long time. Do you see a shift of customers doing their own extensions versus having the partners do it for them? Or do you have visibility into that? Or do you still see a lot of customers working with partners for their extensions?
I see many customers moving moving out from doing all the stuff by themselves, because it got much more complicated. Back in the days, there were people who know everything, who know how to develop, how to use the application, how to configure and set up everything. I think this time is gone for a very long time, in my opinion, because the product is so complicated, and now you have to focus on being a good developer or being a good consultant or yeah.
So you see a shift that the customers are now using partners, to get the terms. I know sometimes there's different terms we use all over depending upon the region, but use partners more for their enhancements or their extensions or their developments, which allows them to work and focus on the software. It is. Exactly. And I ask that question a lot, and I think about as I'm watching the evolution of the product, it is becoming so big. It does a lot. It's a great product. It's been my life. I will always admire it, love it, and use it until I don't, I guess you could say. But it's getting overwhelming because now they've opened it up to work with Power Platform, Dataverse events, and there's a number of things that it's very difficult for a person to know everything. Just know that it's aware, and I need to call Kris, which Kris I don't know, but call Kris if I have a question about this, or I know that they work with it. So I was curious to see if there's a shift of customers going to use their in-house development group or using the partners. It is, I do like the extensions and the events because it's less, you still can make issues, you can still have problems, but it's less problematic and less clutter than it was early on when we did everything within the objects, because people could make changes, and they did because they could, and just threw a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm totally with you. You could do so much things wrong with Seaside, where you can modify each and every object. If you got the solution developer license, you can even modify, posted tables, post document tables, entry tables, and all this stuff. And that was really, really critical. But even with event stuff and extensions, it's you need to know what you're doing, because for example, there's to get a little more in detail, there's the handle pattern, which is very, very much used by Microsoft and by a number of partners in their solutions. But if you don't think what you're doing with the handle pattern, and you just set handle to true and something other doesn't happen anymore, you can break your whole application, and you can create inconsistencies and all these stuff. So but as you said, the product is great, and the environment is great, but you still have to know what you're doing, and it's a very complex product, so you have to focus on what you're doing. For me, for example, I really like what Power Platform and Power Automate and all this stuff can do, but I realized that I cannot focus on this additionally. So I think there are some experts out there, and if I need some of them, I will search for them. But for me, it's not a topic, because I try to focus on my competence, on my main point, and this is just developing and
I love that. Stay
test
focused.
automation and DevOps stuff.
Yes, it's important to stay focused a lot of times. And again, you are correct. Even with events, it doesn't mean that you can write code that doesn't break or doesn't fail or cause problems. You still need to know what you're doing. To me, I was just saying it's less problematic than what it used to be, and at least you can move and upgrade, but you still have to understand what you're doing. And you hit on a point. It is important to focus and know what you can know what you know and what you're working on, or else you'll know a lot of a little. And sometimes that can get you to cause some problems if you're trying to make some changes. So I admire that. And it seems everybody who's working in the community is starting to get the sense that I just can't know everything. I have to align myself with those individuals that understand it, and I can call upon them, Kris, or whichever Kris. that I'm talking to.
And maybe to add one thing regarding the customer mindset, the most customers I work with start with the mindset, hey, we're coming from Dynamics NAV or even Navision, and we can do everything. And it can't be that complicated because, yeah, it has a new name, but it's still NAV. But when you go to cloud, for example, and you are facing monthly updates by Microsoft, you're facing half-year major updates, and you have to maintain your own solution. This is basically the point where the most customers realize, okay, that's quite a lot of work, because how it was in the past, we installed NAV and it was there for 5-10 years in this version. And at some
I know
point,
some people using 2009 Classic
don't say it.
today. Here we are in 2023. That came out, I believe, in 2008, and they're still using 2009 Classic SP2.
Yeah, of course. Just
back when we
because of
used to
Classic
SPs.
Client.
Say it again?
Just because of the Classic Client.
Yes, that was a big shift too. Went from Classic to roll tailored, and then sometimes it's, what's the benefit to upgrading? Or sometimes I think some customers put themselves in a position where they make it so it's very difficult to upgrade, or I use the word upgrade loosely with those versions. You more have to do a re-implementation or another implementation, I believe, because if you're that far beyond, you'd have a lot of steps to go through. And there's a lot of changes in the software and the application, that it's same name, same lineage, but completely different product in my sense. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I would say if you are still on NAV 2009, for example, you modified your solution that much that I would even say it's not possible to upgrade, even if you try, because of all the modifications in the base tables.
Yes, absolutely. So now we have to jump into this dinosaur. You and I were speaking of a previous conversation that we had about dinosaurs. So now that's what got us to speaking today. So lay it on us.
Well, I already mentioned it, I think, a little bit. It's all about mindset. And what I see very often, not just in these customer trainings or even partner trainings, but also when I look into the community, if I look into different boards or JAMA, for example, and I see some questions and I see some code snippets, you very often see old code patterns back from the old days, which don't use any new technique which is now available, which don't focus on for example, testability. And on the other hand, you see the very old things where you have, for example, a procedure with 1,000 lines, for example, which is absolutely not testable. And on the other hand, you see the complete difference with creating code units with just a bunch of code units with just, 10 lines, for example, which is the complete opposite. And what really important is, I think, is to get the middle way at some point. You don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again, but on one hand, you can't just move your old legacy code, I would call it legacy code, to new VS Code, new AL language stuff. Of course, it will work, but it's not even on a performance level or on a functionality level. It's not state of the art. And as I said, in all these boards and tweets and all these stuff, I see so much things where the dinosaur mindset is still there, and they just think in NAV, and NAV is not just the last NAV product is not yet supported or not supported anymore, but also the mindset needs to be out of support, and you have to rethink a lot of stuff. And Microsoft is investing so much in AL and doing great in this, and they are listening to the community and all these. But yeah, I think there's also some legacy mindset there if you see where they are focusing on in some points. So, for example, last year they announced the how is it called? Object Explorer,
AL Object Explorer, I believe, within VS Code,
and
or AL Explorer.
Yeah, exactly, AL Explorer. And for me personally, this is just I know why they are doing this. They are doing this because of all the consultants who don't know how to develop in AL and don't want to learn it. But and I understand that it's maybe important that they can take a look at the code level and see what happens. But I think it's the wrong way, because the boundary between developers and consultants, you have this in each and every modern language, in C#, in JavaScript, even in TypeScript, in whatever. In each and every language, it's there. In AL, it was introduced with no object designer anymore, no report designer anymore, no table designer. Now we're getting a step back with the AL Explorer. So I think also Microsoft needs to focus more on splitting these parties in developers, and which are just focusing on development, not just consulting, and not just not additionally consulting and do whatever, but yeah, just split it up.
Well, I think within the application they do have some legacy code or legacy attributes under the guise of maintainability of previous versions and allowing a path forward. So that you can continually move and progress, because there is a point where you have a language that develops an application, recently with the whole record isolation back to do with the locking, and there's a number of things that have progressed, and they've kept some code or some pieces of that legacy code for backwards compatibility. But I do believe there is a point where you have to cut away from that and say, we haven't been doing this for this many versions. If somebody hasn't upgraded or have moved forward, it's similar to what they did with BC 14, where they introduced Cal and AL in the same version to hopefully start pulling developers forward without alienating them completely and saying there's a new language, a new environment. But you could, have some of those mixed mode applications where you had some code modifications and then you also had some AL extensions possibly. But I think there is a point, like you had said, where you have to, we'll say that that's too far behind. We need to not hold back the language, which in essence can hold back the application, and let that move forward. The AL Explorer, I can understand because of the comfort, but I think in some of that, the ability to easily find their code now that the way they're organizing the source files may be helpful or the easier to navigate, but just for an easier way, I think, to be able to see what's within a particular app, to maybe be able to see the code and find it faster versus having to open up the source list and do a search within it, because that's what I was doing before. Or you'd have to use like somebody else's extension to be able to browse the objects.
Yeah, I'm with you, but with AL Explorer, I don't know if it was the same time, but if you now take a look to the base application, you see all these new folder structures where Microsoft moved all the application objects from base level to subfolders. And basically what you see in the AL Explorer with is this the path option? I don't know. You can specify which view you want to have. Is basically nothing else than the source tree. So I understand, but and of course there were AL extensions already in place, well, VS Code extensions already in place, which do something similar. What I meant is, when I sit in at BC Tech Days 2 years ago, and they had these from the labs session and showed, hey, we will introduce a new AL Explorer. I sit there and said, okay, why? There's so much more important stuff. Why are you doing a step backwards? And I'm with you. It's for navigating. It's very helpful. But now, where we have these folder structures with sales and receivables, with all these subfolders, I don't use it.
I'm a dinosaur, and when they went to the folders, I found it
Me
hard.
too, but
I found it hard to find it. No, I do think that we do have some cases that we need to move forward, and I do think the mindset of the community as a whole can shift now, because you have the contribution, the contribution pilot, to where members of the community can contribute to the base application. And then years ago, I think a lot of implementations had a lot of modifications because they could make the modification. Either somebody didn't understand the application, or they thought it was just easier to make a modification instead of trying to get somebody to use it. But I think now, with it having such a vast use, it's almost like, how much should you develop? How many extensions should you add versus trying to either use something that's already in existence, be something that's an app on app source, or work within the application, because maybe you can do what you need to do without having to make a modification, thus having the cost that you need to maintain that, because you yourself stated it's a lot of work to come in, like you said, the pipelines. Now with the online version, every month you get an update. Yes, you can delay it for 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is today. I forget the number. Some days it seems like it's 90, seems like it's 60, it goes back and forth, but you can delay it for a couple periods of time. But if there's any changes, then you have to ensure that your extensions will also be compatible with the newer version. So you have to continually pay to maintain that. So that, to me, is a mindset, along with the focus, that needs to be brought to the forefront of, do we really even need this extension? I don't talk about reports as extensions. I mean, we all know that the base application has some reports that are a little bit less than desired, and some of them today, I think they go back to version 1 because they haven't been touched since then. They just, threw an RDLC layout on them and, called it a day. But I think that is a mindset of it as well.
But I totally understand why they don't touch the reports, because, let's be honest, each and every customer has custom reports with additional fields. So it's cool that there is something to show in a demo or something like this, but the new ones look a little better, but the old ones
No, I agree with you. I'd have a few basic reports. Everybody wants a custom, that's where they had the old custom report layouts. Now you can have multiple report layouts within your extension, but having that ability, satisfied that problem, because we were able to do that. And it's good. How have you found the adoption of AL from Cal within your trainings?
Well, basically, it's my intro is always, it's not that much different, and basically, if you can read Cal, you can also write AL, of course, but as I said, it's a shift of a mindset, and let's for example, we didn't have interfaces in Cal. So it's completely new to learn what an interface is, what an interface means in terms of a contract. And it's also very, very, very important to understand that potentially each and every app, of course, it's a bigger thing if you publish your app to app source, but potentially each and every app must be extendable from another third-party application or even a customer application, a PTE. And that's why it's important to have this contract thing in mind. So the shift from CAL to AL is not just about syntax or not about how to write particular code, but to get them away from the isolated view. This is my application and just my application, and no one else will ever touch it. So I don't need to document anything. I don't need to structure my code. I don't need to test my code because my code always runs. I know about it. I know this. And this change of mindset back to, I will develop an open application, even if it's just mine, even if it's just my PTE. Maybe in a year or in 2 years, I will add another PTE on top of it. I will extend my existing PTE or whatever. And this change of mindset takes some time. So typically my basic training from CAL to AL takes about 5 days, and we don't code that much in this training.
I can see that. And I like to say that the language is evolving to become a more contemporary language, but you hit on a point where there's a mindset, and it's almost like if you're writing a PTE, when I talk with other members of the community or even customers or somebody asking questions of me about development, I always say, write it as if you're submitting it as an app. Yeah. Get into the discipline, get into the habit, because you hit on a very good point. Today it does this, but if I leave the events, if I go with this whole test-driven development model so that I can have testability of my, whatever you want to call them, procedures, methods, functions, every day of the week there's another word and somebody's talking about something. It's, how can I expand upon that in the future, making it easier for me? So if I have this mindset or discipline to make it modular, to put the hooks, as some would call it, in the right places, I can easily extend upon that without affecting the existing functionality, the existing application, and I can test it and make sure it works. So the discipline of that, and you said that D word, documentation. Who documents? I've seen so many implementations.
I developed an VS Code extension, and it's about AL documentation. It's bringing before Microsoft did this, I created the extension with the XML documentation in AL, and with a little helper, including some lightweight code corps and all this stuff, because I think it's very important. And now Microsoft do a really great job, because, for example, the XML documentations are exported in a separate file inside of the app file, so you can extract it from there and get more information and see how you can extend it. And what I try to teach additionally is
I do use that, by the way. I just want to let you know, the AL XML documentation.
Great.
I have to talk with you about some switches that we need to put to turn it off and turn it on in certain areas.
I work for a completely redesigned version based on C# for quite a while now, because if you try to open some base application objects or some huge code units, it's pretty slow, because I'm not that JavaScript guy, so I think it's not that great performance on this page. So anyway, but yeah, let's talk about this.
But I do use it, and I have used it to generate the documentation as a PDF in the separate folder, even a PDF, because it is helpful to document apps, to see where you have your events, or to see what you have for your public procedures. It makes it a little bit easier, even for yourself, to keep it organized within your coding thing. So I did have to tell you that. So example, you're like a celebrity now.
Great. What we do, for example, with our apps, we don't try to expose our objects with a bunch of events and all this stuff. But what we're trying to do is each and every app is at least providing one what we call API code unit. So it's a public code unit accessible from other extensions, and there we provide the main functionality we want to expose with our apps. And we use our XML documentation for our documents website. So all these documentations you see there are just coming from the XML documentation. And it helps us to understand code we wrote 2 years ago. And it helps partners and other customers to adopt our solutions and extend our solutions.
I think those documentation is helpful, especially if you're wanting functional consultants to fully understand your product. I think it's going to be a quick turnaround and don't have to spend so much time asking the questions. So documentation is very, very important from a functional standpoint.
I think it's even, you said, as Kris had said, well, the other Kris, I don't know which one. I'll just say Kris. Kris has stated, but it's even helpful with developers because many times you're writing something, it's like, I'll remember this, or I'll just come back to it. And then 2 years later, you look at it and you go, what was it that I was doing? Oh, yeah. So the documentation is helpful. I wish that more time was spent into it. I think everybody thinks that they don't have time to do it now, but they will spend 3 times as much in the future trying to figure out what they were doing or what somebody else was doing. And it's not as efficient, even with somebody within your own team. Sometimes it can be helpful.
I think most people think they don't need it because they say, I don't need to comment my code or document my code because it's readable, and I create procedure names which explain what the procedure is doing. But for the initial version, I'm fine with this. But I think we all know how an application can grow and can get more functionality, and then it starts at a procedure will contain 2 actions instead of 1, and now the name of the procedure is not that right anymore. And so it helps a lot.
I'm laughing because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I see this almost daily. I've lived it a lot where, like you said, it grows. I call it grows legs. Like it just grows legs and it walks away from the initial design. And sometimes someone thinks it's faster to just make a little modification because I only need to do this one little change in this one little procedure. And then it turns out to be, another one little before. So now this whole entire procedure is changed to have 17,000 different options instead of even possibly breaking it out or
procrastination,
obsoleting that one and doing another one. Say that again?
It's procrastination. Sometimes you're like, I got to get this out of the way, blah, blah, blah. And then you forgot down the road that you wrote this, and, customers pay for it in the long run. And I was like, I'm here. I'm still going to be around. I'll support it. And then one day you leave, and then they got to figure it out. So
you work with the development, you talk with the mindset going forward. If you could see something added to the AL language, what would it be?
I really looked forward for the namespace thing. So again, this year on BC Tech Days, I sit in the audience and I cheered for it because I was so happy that they announced it. Basically, also complex data types, and this was something I really looked forward to. I would be happy. Obsoleting objects is a thing in my world because of course we also did not everything right from the beginning. We started with our first apps in 2019 and one of the first AL versions, and of course we had the old mindset and we did some stuff we regret until today, and we obsoleted a lot of stuff, and I would wish for getting some kind of an option to get rid of old table extensions, dependencies to other applications you don't need anymore. For example, we have one app which has a dependency to a Microsoft app, but we don't use it anymore. It's just there because we can't remove it. And yeah, sure, we can resubmit the app and with a new app ID and get rid of this and tell all our customers, okay, uninstall this one, install this one, and we will figure out how we can move the data from from 1 to 2. But this would something I would really be happy about, and but that's more a platform thing, I guess. Also, the set load fields was pretty cool. That's now there with more control. The table extension disaster, I would say, is something I'm really looking forward
That is one thing. I have some table extension. I laugh because we have so many similarities, as we learned when we were speaking before. I have some table extensions that I just cringe every time. I'm like, this just needs to go away. And you can't do anything with it because it becomes a breaking change.
Yeah.
And that breaking change to me is the biggest bad word. And you mentioned complex data types or data types. For some reason, I'm just infatuated with the list data type and the dictionary data type. I was so happy when they added it.
Yeah.
I would love to see a list of lists instead of keeping, the simple data types or the basic, whatever you call it, the simple data types. Instead of just having lists of those, I'd love to see like a list of a list of a list, because then I could really move data around.
That's a nice idea.
That way it's not just like a list of integer or a list of, decimals. I want like a list of lists, so I can have.
I knew at some point, I think with our address validation, I wished for a list of record IDs. I think that was also not possible at this time. I'm not sure how it's now, but
I think you're still limited to the simple data types, if I recall, as of this recording. So yes, the list of record IDs would be great, because then one of the benefits of it is you don't have to pass a table or a temporary table. You can pass data in a list, which is more efficient if you're looking at the performance point of view. So getting those record IDs to have a set of records might make it a little easier, which would be good as well. Let's see the other.
Additional one thing on my wish list would be some kind of possibility to test control-it-ins, for example. I know that's a pretty big wish because you can do so much strange things with it. But I don't know, implementing some kind of an JavaScript test framework or something like this into our tests in VC, that would be awesome, because there are a lot of control-it-ins implementations inside of app source apps, but let's be honest, it's not possible to test them. You can test the business logic behind it, but not. For example, we have an address validation or address prediction, we call it, where a little drop down appears under the name field or the address field in contact customer and so on, and you can't test it. You can't test if it appears on the right anchor. So is it anchored on the name field, or is it floating around somewhere? Is it triggered right? Or you can't test this. You have to do this manually with each major version at least.
So you mentioned the dinosaurs with the mindset and coming up to thinking of working with an AL. When you work with someone moving or migrating from Cal over to AL, what are some techniques that you think can help sort of wipe the mind of the old bad habits, as I'll call them for this conversation, to get into the right mindset to code in AL versus Cal?
I'm pretty sure that this will cause a shitstorm, but
well, that's okay.
We're
pretty good at that.
I think what really helps, even if AL is not object oriented, it helps to read or take a look to tutorials for object oriented languages like C#, for example, because there are so many patterns and so many best practice approaches we can adopt in AL. And AL is slowly, but moving more and more in this direction of C#. Of course, because it's just a transpiler. So we are just writing AL. AL is compiled into C#, and then C# is executed. So it's pretty obvious that's moving into this direction slowly. But what I think and what I suggest all people all developers who try to move from CHL to AL is take a look at other programming languages which are object oriented. As I said, yeah, there's a lot of stuff which is not going to work in AL, and that's also something on my wish list. By the way, I would love if AL was created object oriented. I think it's not possible anymore because AL is too far right now. But back in the days when they created it, maybe there was an opportunity, even if it's a really big step in terms of converting and all this stuff. But one of the major problems we have in NAV, we had in NAV and we have in BC, is extending and table field. Of course, now it's limited because of breaking changes and all this stuff, but this is just an limitation we have because we're not object oriented. If we were object oriented, or if we could reference my table, my customer has a table field name, and this name references to the table customer with the field name, and getting inherit the length and the data type and all this stuff. So when I change the base table, my table will also be changed. That would be a dream. But I know it's pretty.
No, I think there are a lot of complexities with the data, and I understand it, as complicated as it may make things. I've tried to rationalize in my head and understand why, or the complexities of it. And again, with it being object-based versus object-oriented, I think it does instill some limitations. And with the application getting further and further along, it in essence would need to be rewritten along with every other extension. It's that perpetual cycle of you have to throw, it's like the frog in the boiling water. You almost need to slowly make these changes, just like with the language. I myself appreciate how they've added some of the C# tendencies, I'll call them, with even, the enum as integer, or with the text variables with two upper, two lower, and, all the different C# types, all of that stuff that was added. I was so excited when they added it. And like you, I still see a lot of times where that code does not take advantage of the extended methods within those data types versus coming up with, uppercase, lowercase, the actual call. So I'm happy that they're moving that way, and they keep the other functions as well for the compatibility, but we need to also do something for forcing it. And some of it, I think, to keep the compatibility for their existing code, so they don't have to rewrite it every single time.
Yeah, sure. It's totally understandable, I think, because the base application is such a huge monster. It's pretty hard to maintain it. I'm totally with it. But let's get back to your question. I moved a little bit back away from it. As I said, I always suggest read some or view some videos, follow some tutorials in other programming languages. And one of my base suggestions is see a code unit like a class in C#, for example, and .NET World. And think about all the stuff which you are implementing from an object-oriented point of view. I know it's not possible at every point. So, for example, for models, tables, table extensions, fields, and this stuff. But why not? For example, simple example. Back in the days, my teacher, my mentor told me, never, 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 ever do procedures or create procedures inside of a form. Back in the days, it was a form of a page object. And
Or
I
put code
followed it
behind
for
fields on a page.
so many years. But now I say, why? Why don't do it? If you have a particular page which does one particular job, why do I need a page object and a associated code unit object which is providing the code for this page, even if this code unit doesn't be able to run standalone? If it's able to do something in standalone, okay, that's great. But if you are in a context of a specific page with for example, temporary record or something like this, why do I need to export my source code to another object? Keep it together, and then also, I know it's not true, but then also the page is some kind of an isolated class and an isolated object which holds all the information you need, and you just have to take a look to one specific thing. And yeah, I know testing is not that easy this way, but it's possible, and it's also about well structuring your code, not just creating the old styled management code units where you have thousands of functions inside. And I pretty love the sales post code unit, for example. It's also a monster with I don't know how many procedures in there. It's just the same with the purchase post or with the general journal post line and all this stuff. It's just a management code unit which holds so much functionality, so it's not, you cannot handle it anymore in my.
So Chris, what was your feedback when you're teaching a class? Now, when you're teaching a class, is it majority dinosaurs or also new? And if there are dinosaurs and you bring up this topic, like what was the reaction you would get?
I just have to laugh because I can't tell you how many management code units I've written, but I break up my management code units into small management code units.
Me too, by the way. I did this for many years.
So I just laugh listening to this. It makes me now, but I do break them up into small management code units. It's not like sales post management. It might be add a capital letter management and another management. I have to take this class, I think. Next time you have the class, maybe I can participate for a short period of time because I have to clean out this dinosaur brain.
Yeah. One of the first reactions is, then we need to, for example, if I say, hey, keep your code units small, don't do management code units, don't put everything. I saw a lot of customers which have a code unit which was called customer name management. It was just one code unit, 50,000, and they put everything what you can imagine in there. And
I feel guilty.
Sorry. and one of the
you shouldn't even develop, so don't feel guilty. You just they should lock you out of VS Code completely.
And one of the first things they respond is, oh, then we need so much code units, that's so expensive because in the old perpetual licensing stuff, I don't know, $600 or something like this for 10 code units. Yeah, it was a lot of money, and you have to pay the maintenance fee yearly, and but in cloud,
that's why they had big ones right there to save money.
Yeah,
and you didn't have to get new licensed objects and add the additional 16% or whatever it was on top of it, depending upon where you are.
Yeah, but now when we're talking about cloud, it's not a topic anymore.
No.
So because of course in on-prem world, but it's more. It's basically not the truth that you need so much code units then. It's just forcing you to restructure and rethink how you design things. By the way, this is also something I mentioned at the very beginning of my trainings. At least for me, I just talk about myself. back in the days when I worked in Seaside, often I get some requirements from customers, from a consultant or something like this. And I did not have a full picture in my mind how it will look and how it will work. And I started, let's start working. Let's create a table. Let's create a page. Let's create a code unit. Oh, I need this function and I need this function. And the product or the functionality growed while was designed while I created it. And of course, this will also work in VS Code and also work in AL, but it results every time in the same, in a bad designed piece of code. Because then it starts with, oh, I need this function or this procedure. Okay, will I create a new code unit for it? No, it's just this code. I just put it there because there I have already 10 other 10 other procedures. I put it there. And then another came and I say, okay, maybe I will do a to-do comment and say, this is a future Chris problem. And he will move it at some point. He will move it from code unit A to code unit B. And something like that.
I don't know if I can talk with you anymore because I can't tell you how many to-dos I have. That's why I had to get like the to-do tree so I can see how the to-dos for the future problems. See, this is have you been watching me?
Basically, I've also installed to-do tree. But we don't use it just for to-dos. It's also for notes, for upcoming changes in dependent things and all these stuff. But and I don't say to-dos are not a good idea if you extend something and you see. My mentor back in the day told me every time you open a code unit, you open an object, you have to leave it better than it was. And this is something I try to follow until today. And sometimes I open a
great
code unit.
Advice.
It
by
is,
the way,
definitely.
And it's not only for that. I use that outside. I do preach that as well, but it's also when you go someplace. Leave the place you visit better than it was when you got there.
Yeah.
That just needs to be in everyone's brain. Wherever you go, leave it better than you found it.
Yeah, but let's be honest. If we are working for a customer, or you think it's just this little modification, and maybe you scroll over a procedure and you see something, and you say, okay, that's maybe not that great. For example, you have an iteration of something and appending a text to a text and don't use the string text builder, or you see, I don't know, company information table is fetched from the database and you don't use set load fields, but there are a bunch of other extensions extending this table so it gets slower and slower and slower. And even if it's just one simple record in there, it has an impact if you have, I don't know, 10 extensions which the SQL Server needs to join in. And we all know this. I know it from myself. And this is a point where I use it to do, and I say, okay, there's something I don't have time to do right now. But let me leave this comment in here. And if I go there a second time and I see I already commented this, I will definitely takes the time to fix it or to recreate
the to-do can count as making it better, but you also have to be careful because I've done that and said, I can fix this and clean this up, make it more efficient. And then it's like pulling a thread on a sweater because you try to fix this one little thing and then you find out that that's like a piece of glue or a Band-Aid that's holding like the wall and the dam together, and the water just starts running out because you're trying to fix this little thing. That's what with this guy, Chris, you look at some of the stuff he wrote, you don't even touch it. I just put to do, fix in the future, because the whole dike, dam, or whatever you want to call it's going to break. And 3 days later, here I am. All I had to do was go in and make a simple change, but nope, I had to fix something. And it took me 3 days to fix the problem that wasn't even related.
Yeah, but when you have automated tests in place, they will tell it to you that your optimization maybe was not that good. And you can decide to roll it back, for example, and then create a to-do marker and say, okay, that's bad and complicated. So
Yeah.
let's do it later.
No, that's good. All right, Kris, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I do look forward to speaking with you again because we have some more dinosaur topics to talk about. But if you would, could you tell us how we can see some of the great things that you're doing with even with your little Visual Studio app, some of the apps that you have, or other information that you have available online?
You mean about my company?
Yes, how to get a hold of you to see some of the apps that you have, to learn more about you and some of the other things that you're doing.
Well, we have a website. Share my screen, or is it even possible?
You can say what it is. We'll put it in the show notes. So you can share your screen if you want to as well.
Okay, then I'll just say it. It's 365 Business DEV, so for development.com. And as I said, we're a German company, so the website is in German and English. And we have just really small apps. We're not trying to create an huge ISV vertical app to extend all BC and create new modules. What we're trying to do is just simplify the daily business with BC, and therefore we created a printing app, for example, to reintroduce direct printing and controlling label printers and all this stuff. We created an address validation and prediction app, which is pretty cool because of the behavior inside of BC. So you get a drop down when you start typing. That's pretty cool. Created barcoding app for creating 2D and 1D barcodes, encoding, decoding, PDF manipulation. So just pretty simple things, which you and everybody can include in their customizations, in their partner solutions, to do not reinvent the wheel every time. And
That's good.
Basically, it's just about simplification. And
no, it's good. I like that approach because you're solving problems. You're not doing something big. You're focusing on a problem and you're solving that problem. So that's 365 businessdev.com, and also your wonderful VS Code extension, which I do use as well, is the AL XML documentation.
Now I have a little more motivation to finalize the new version.
I think so. I think now we'll have to put you on that, and we'll have to talk with you when you do, and continue some of the dinosaur conversations, as I love to have them. Maybe it just makes me feel better because we're all these old timers, I guess, with all this old thoughts. But again, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
All right. Thank you, Kris.
Bye.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.